Sai is a miserable orphan who was constantly bullied and hated by every chick in school. However, after he becomes the new Demon King and decides to change his fate by destroying God, all the freaky baddies start thirsting for his magic stick. It all starts on the day Sai first stepped foot in the city. As he starts making his way into the train station, he runs into an old woman who had just spilled her luggage and decides to help. After helping her pack it up, he tries to carry it up the stairs, but she politely declines and starts struggling to get it back from him. The next moment, a baddie with a fatty attacks him and ends up apologizing minutes later because she thought he was attacking her granny. Afterwards, he arrives at the academy and makes his way over to the assessment hall where he meets Tori, a blonde hottie who introduces herself as the teacher in charge of new transfers. She then leads him to a crew of students, each waiting their turn to get future predictions from an artificial crow spirit. Sai gets hyped up to hear that his dream of becoming a high priest and doing good deeds around the world is actually possible. However, as soon as he places his hand on the glass, it starts sweating buckets and almost passes out before revealing that he will become a Demon King. Suddenly, everyone runs back in fear as they all remember that the Demon King once tried to wipe out all of humanity. Tori then walks him into class to introduce him to everyone else, and he gets excited the moment he sees Hattori, the caked-up baddie from the train station. However, as soon as Tori mentions that he is the new Demon King, all the students scramble for safety. Upon seeing this, Sai decides to make a great first impression and proceeds to give a speech about how it is wrong to discriminate against him for something he has no control over. Unfortunately, he actually starts looking like the previous Demon King, causing everyone to get even more terrified. Later, Tori says they need a new class representative, and as soon as she decides to give the position to Hattori, a broccoli-haired midget named Hiroshi gets up to nominate Sai instead. This completely catches the entire class off guard, but Sai declines and asks to join the cleaning committee instead. The next moment, everyone runs away from him again, and Tori explains that the cleaning committee is actually a violent group tasked with keeping the academy's darkest secrets at all costs. Hattori then decides to punish him for playing with her feelings, but the moment he grabs her sword, an insane amount of magic flows through his arms and blows up the entire class. Hours later, he returns to his dorm and sees Hiroshi, who then starts acting like a slave and says he would be pleased to help out with anything he needs. Sai then asks for directions to the girls' dorm so he can apologize to Hattori. Moments later, Hiroshi tells Sai to climb to her window since walking into the front door will only cause more drama. As soon as he reaches her window and knocks, she rips it open and starts scolding him with her plots exposed. When she asks why he used the special lover's knock, he tries to explain that it was Hiroshi's idea, but she decides to punish him again and starts chasing him into the woods. The next moment, he runs into another freaky hottie named Soga, who then offers to protect him and starts fighting Hattori until Sai accidentally releases another magic blast that nearly destroys the entire forest. Once again, Hattori ends up with her plots exposed, but just then, a portal appears, and another chick named Korone walks through to meet Sai. Years ago, Soga showed up at a monastery and started bawling her eyes out as she had no one left to turn to, but that Sai, who practically grew up there, cheered her up and gave her a special dove amulet before leaving to accomplish his dreams. Back in the crater he just created, Korone suddenly pulls out a special gun, and as she starts shooting Hattori up with healing beams, Sai realizes that she is a type of android called Lilidens and struggles to believe his eyes as he never expected one to look so good. As soon as she stops using the gun, Hattori gets embarrassed and runs back to the dorm, so she stops Sai from chasing after her and explains that she was sent to observe him. She then says they have to go see the headmaster first, but upon hearing this, Soga gets terrified and suddenly vanishes with nothing but her clothes left on the floor. Minutes later, Sai ends up in the headmaster's office, listening as Korone tells him and Tori about what happened. Luckily, she further explains that he was only trying to have a talk with Hattori, so the headmaster decides to let it slide since no one was severely hurt. Sai then asks why a hot android was assigned to watch him, so the headmaster explains how dangerous it would be to let the new Demon King roam around unsupervised. Tori quickly notices the frustration in his eyes and takes him outside to explain that having Koro follow him around can actually be a good thing since none of his haters will even consider attacking him. After he agrees that it might just keep him safe from all the hate, she takes him to a table to ask about the powers he used earlier on, but he claims to be just as confused because he never expected to feel such an immense level of magic coursing through his veins. She then explains that being the Demon King has given his body the ability to control magic that he just isn't used to yet. After giving him a moment to take it all in, she hands him the student handbook and explains how he can use it to have a telepathic conversation with anyone in the academy. Minutes later, he returns to his room but quickly gets fed up with Koro-ne's endless staring, so he tells her to go to sleep since he is also about to turn. This ends up being a huge mistake when he turns over a couple minutes later and gets charged up by the sight of her plot. To avoid getting expelled for clapping RoboKitty, he tells her to sleep somewhere else, so she climbs into the top cabinet and decides to spend the rest of the night watching him. On the way to class the next day, he struggles to keep himself awake since Koro-ne made it difficult to sleep through the night. But the moment a purple-haired baddie with huge racks shows up to talk to him, his eyes light up like he just overdosed on crack. After introducing herself as the head of the female dorm, Eto grabs his hand and claims to know how kind he actually is, unlike everyone else. She further promises to help with anything he ever needs, and as soon as she walks off, his hope in humanity gets restored. Later that day, he finds himself on the toilet bowl because it's the only way he can get privacy from Koro-ne. And while she starts terrifying all the other guys by closely observing their meat sabers, Sai calls Eto to ask for help with Hattori. When she tells him that they have to meet in private to discuss it, he reminds her that Koro-ne's programming is now dedicated to watching him, so she tells him about a special spot near her factory-made cakes that will shut her down if he pulls on it. Shortly after this, Hiroshi joins them both for lunch, and when he suddenly says he wants to visit a dangerous forest behind the academy on his own, Hiroshi misunderstands and lets everyone know that he wants his first time to be with Koro-ne. Minutes later, they both reach the woods, and as Koro-ne leads the way inside, he starts bending over to find the spot Eto was talking about until someone suddenly knocks him down. Koro-ne then asks if he is truly this shameless, and when he tries to explain the mysterious punch, she tells him to stop the cap because the only living thing she can sense is the demon dog currently charging towards them. The next moment, she pulls out a gun to murk the insane dog, but it practically eats the bullet, so Sai shoves her out of the way and grabs a hold of its fur to try and hold it down. Koro-ne then tries to shoot it with a more powerful bullet, but he tells her to stop and starts purging the demon dog's mana until it reverts to a cute puppy. After he explains that it likely went nuts after absorbing too much magic, they hear someone screaming to be saved from the puppy, so he rushes over and sees Soga, but she quickly turns invisible again so he won't see her vanilla buns. Upon seeing this, Koro-ne explains that she can also hide her mana when she turns invisible, which is how she couldn't sense anything before. But as she bends over a bush to look through Soga's stuff, Sai spots her tail and immediately pulls it to shut her down. Eto then conveniently reveals herself and promises to convince Hattori to speak with him before suggesting that he joins the disciplinary committee since he wants to help out so badly. After he accepts, she places 2 pink pills in his hand and also hands him a Barbie blaster before explaining how he has to get Hattori to take the pill if he ends up in another freaky misunderstanding. With that said, she leaves the forest, and he takes a moment to appreciate the fact that someone in the academy treats him like a normal person before turning Koro-ne back on. Thankfully, her programming stops her from noticing the lost time, so she continues looking through Soga's things. But then they hear her screaming again, so Sai rushes over and finally catches her. However, as her invisibility wears off, she scrambles to cover up her plots while Sai begs Koro-ne not to report him to the feds. Later that night, Eto gives Hattori a call, but instead of telling her how nice Sai really is, she claims that he forced her to make the call, so Hattori promises to take care of him once and for all. As soon as she hangs up, Eto unlocks a secret chamber to tell her undead brother all about her plans to make Sai her slave. Years ago, she had the perfect relationship with Annie, as he was the only one in their family that spent time with her. However, that only lasted for a few more months as he ended up in the afterlife because of a failed mission. To top it all off, their mother constantly told her not to cry over him because his weakness brought disrespect to the family name, so Eto decided to become immensely powerful to make sure she never suffers the same fate. Back in her room, she continues explaining her plan to make the new demon king her love slave, so Annie tries to talk her out of it, but she tells him to shut up and watch. Around the same time, Sai enters the boys' bath with Hiroshi, who then explains how the student body is actually split between delinquents who secretly practice black magic and good guys like Hattori who fight against them. After he leaves, Sai also decides to head inside and receives a call from Eto, who just paused her goon session to tell him where to meet Hattori. The following day, Sai meets up with the student council members to discuss his new plan to join the disciplinary committee, but after they explain how he essentially has to fight a lot of delinquents, he starts having second thoughts. However, they end up announcing him as the new enforcer and increase the amount of hate he already receives before even giving him a chance to think. Despite this, he decides to focus on fixing his relationship with Hattori, so as soon as classes end for the day, he returns to the dorm with Koro-ne and loads up the special pills Eto gave him before thinking of a new way to reach her tail. Just as he sits on the bed and starts reaching for her cakes, Soga shows up to share her rice cakes with him and also brings her rice cooker along because she is no longer allowed to keep it in her room. After minutes of forcing himself to listen to the Ike-reducing ideas she has for world peace, he makes up an excuse to get some alone time. So she agrees to leave but promises to be back tomorrow for more rice-filled yap sessions. He then quickly pulls Koro-ne's tail but also gets a feel for her buns in the process before heading to the old building Eto told him about. As soon as he reaches the basement, a red-haired thug knocks him out and signals the rest of his crew to stop hiding. Seeing the new Demon King on the floor gets them excited, as they never expected him to be that weak. But as they get closer for a proper beatdown, he nearly zaps them into oblivion and slowly gets back up while thanking them for helping him understand a little bit more about his abilities. Due to being even more stupid than Patrick Star, they decide to ignore the obvious risk and attack again, so he starts casually cracking their legs just by manipulating the mana in the air. They then bring out Hiroshi, who somehow looks like his face got run over by a tractor. But instead of folding, Sai doubles down and uses his telekinesis to toss the rest of them around like ragdolls before chaining up the boss. Just as he goes for the final blow, Hattori shows up and accuses him of trying to control the entire school as part of his world domination grand plan. Leak always. He tries to explain and she refuses to hear a word, so he reaches for the Barbie gun but gets shocked when he sees that the special pills are missing. Hattori then promises to make him pay and drops a smoke bomb to escape for the night. Meanwhile, Eto, who was watching the whole thing, wonders why her pills went missing before taking herself to the climax point. The next day, Hattori sends out an announcement inviting all of Sai's haters to join her in a final battle to end his reign of terror. In a matter of minutes, the entire school turns into a war zone, as practically every student starts chasing him around campus. When Hattori finally corners him, he once again tries to explain himself, but she tells him not to bother and slowly walks closer to get into striking distance. As she then raises her sword to split him in two, Soga suddenly shows up and explains what Sai has been trying to tell her about his true intentions before telling her to accept that she likes him. Upon hearing this, all the other students turn on her, so she also tries to explain herself, and he quickly uses that opportunity to make her understand how he feels every day. She then apologizes and prepares to fight with him, but as they charge in, Koro-ne suddenly fires off her bazooka and floods the school with a rice shower that surprisingly turns all the blood-hungry students into ecstasy fiends. In his room later on, Kurana analyzes the rice to figure out what happened, while Soga explains how she stole the special pills from his gun, because they make people get along. Just then, Koro-ne reveals that the pills are actually used to turn whoever takes them into mindless slaves for a short period of time. But as Sai's slow brain struggles to figure out the obvious, Eto ends up having the time of her life with almost every student that took the rice. The next day, she watches him from a distance as he chats with Hiroshi and eventually decides to head back inside but promises herself to get his glizzy at all costs. Just then, Sai notices that Soga didn't come to class again, and when he asks if anyone knows why, Hiroshi says it's because she has no control over magic and can only fly, causing Sai to get suspicious since it's clear that no one knows about her invisibility. Moments later, he ends up alone as everyone else partners up to practice mana control with mana orbs, but Hattori thankfully shows up to save him from loneliness. As soon as she offers to be his partner, he grabs her hand to express his gratitude, but she quickly pulls away to stop everyone from saying that his riz made her fold. After Tori explains the goal for the day, she creates a mana orb and tells him to focus on simply throwing it back, but after she tosses it over to him, he loses control of his powers and causes another explosion that destroys the entire training ground along with her clothes. Minutes later, he finds a spot to sit and accepts that he is a lost cause destined for destruction, but then Tori suggests using the mental strength chamber to fortify his mind to the point where he can handle his new powers. Upon hearing this, Hiroshi tries to tell him that nobody has ever made it out of the 12-hour mental torture chamber with their mind intact, but Tori shatters his face with her heels for talking too much. Later that evening, Sai ends up at the chamber despite all the warnings, and after he crawls into it, Koro-ne enters as well and reminds him that she needs to observe him at all times. The next moment, she snuggles up to him and starts squeezing her plastic jugs into his arm, so he asks for some space, but she explains that it's all part of the mental training. However, after taking one look at her drumsticks, he tries to move away and suddenly gets startled by another juicy pair of melons floating around beside him. As he squeezes even harder, Soda finally reveals herself and explains that she just wanted to keep him company with some food. At the same time, Eto shows up outside the chamber with a special bullet filled with hallucination magic and decides to make him delirious with endless visions, until his mind falls apart just enough for her charms to work. Back inside the chamber, Sai tries to relax his back on the wall, but it suddenly crumbles, so he reaches in and pulls out an old map of the school with coordinates for 3 special keys. When Sobi gets excited and says it probably leads to a treasure chest, he decides to continue his training, but then her bladder suddenly gets full, so she starts squirming. He then offers to let her use his waterproof bag since he brought it just for that, but she gets embarrassed and refuses, so Korone offers to use her apple juice as an energy source by drinking it. This causes Soga to freak out, so she frantically starts banging the door and begging for help. Upon hearing this, Eto decides not to use her magic bullets as she believes that he has already lost it, so she pushes the emergency button and prepares to take him in her arms, only to get knocked down by Soga as she runs away to empty her insides. Sai then tries to ask why she is even here, but she sees the map they found and quickly grabs it before leaving. In her room minutes later, she asks Annie what it leads to since it's his handwriting on it, but he apologizes for disappointing her because he can't remember anything about it. The following day, she remains confused about it because undead folks like him can't lie even if they wanted to. Just then, a green-haired chick named Teruya shows up and warns her to be careful of her addiction to Sai, but Eto quickly realizes that she is not an actual student and asks what she wants. After claiming that she already received permission to roam around campus, Teruya walks off, and Eto immediately tries to follow her, but then she notices a lot of commotion and enters the presentation hall, where she receives the shock of a lifetime upon seeing that the map Sai found is being displayed for everyone to see. To make matters worse, she realizes that copies have been pasted all across campus, so she storms out to find Sai, who also just noticed it and gets shocked when some of the students get placed on stretchers. As they all start complaining of a monster that attacked them while they were searching for the treasure, he goes to meet Lily, the student council president, who then tells him to call for an assembly and ban everyone from using the maps. After they all learn that it was Soga putting up all the copies this entire time, Sai calls for the assembly, but as soon as he tells everyone that they can't go looking for the treasure, they accuse him of planning the entire thing as another part of his world domination plan. As they start throwing stuff at him, Teruya suddenly jumps on stage and shatters the podium before force-feeding him some kitty. She then suggests having only him go look for the treasure to prove his innocence, and after he agrees to it, she casually walks off like she didn't just get eaten in front of the entire academy. Minutes later, Lily tells Sai to merely enter the location on the map and leave without doing anything else just to keep the students from starting a riot. He then asks why he can't just stop the monster attacking them, but she insists that he should leave all the heavy lifting to them. So he heads out with Korone, but admits that he doesn't fully trust her intentions. After meeting up with Eto, who then gives him a special magic gun to help him locate the treasure for obvious selfish reasons, he heads out with Korone and Hiroshi, but Teruya also shows up to join them at the last moment. Minutes later, they arrive at the entrance of the first point on the map, so Korone takes a close look at it for clues and notices a strange name. Once inside the chamber, they see that it's littered with the tombstones of soldiers that got clapped during the First Great War, so Sai tells them to look for the strange name on the map. As they start searching, he gets upset over the lack of respect for the fallen soldiers. But this suddenly upsets Teruya, who then asks why he cares since he is the Demon King. He then explains that he never actually wanted to be a Demon King, and she starts calling him boring. But then he suddenly loads up the special gun Eto gave him because twin tornadoes suddenly appeared behind her. Around the same time, Hattori notices that he is not inside, so she heads over to Soga's room and wakes her up to ask for his whereabouts. As soon as she says he left with Teruya, her spidey senses start to tingle, so she runs off to find them. By then, Teruya has just failed her first attempt to cut through the tornadoes, so Sai tells her to stay back, but she refuses to listen to him and ends up getting tossed away like a rag doll. Upon seeing the defeated look on her face, Sai decides to get serious and charges up the magic gun with his mana before letting off a single shot that dissolves both tornadoes. The next moment, Teruya regains her strength and pounces on him, so he tries to get her fishy plot off his back, but after tripping, he spots the tombstone they have been searching for. After opening up the grave, he finds a toy with a voice message saying something about the Chamber of Knights, and while they try to figure it out, Eto, who had been watching with a hidden camera, asks Sei about the toy because he always used it to communicate with her during his missions back. He then says she still can't remember anything about that night, and as she starts getting emotional about it, Soga drops in with her plots completely exposed and convinces her to go meet up with Sai and the others. Around the same time, Hattori continues racing towards an old ruined city to save Sai from Teruya, but then she suddenly falls into a sinkhole. Meanwhile, Sai and the others have just found the Chamber of Knights, so they slowly head inside. But Hiroshi suddenly gets scared and says he saw one of the giant knights moving. Naturally, Sai tells him to stop being so scared, but just as he turns back, the knight attacks, so he quickly jumps out of the way before shooting at it. Upon seeing that the bullets had no effect, he casually grabs the knight's axe and flips it like a pancake, so it walks off to hide the shame of being a complete weakling. They then keep looking for clues in the chamber, and when he finally notices a tablet with instructions suggesting a hidden body of water in the ruins, Korone offers to track it with special tongs. Moments later, she leads them through the woods, and Hiroshi keeps talking about all the rumors he has heard about the secret hot springs until they get to an opening and find the hot springs mentioned in the tablet. After taking a closer look, Korone tells them that there's more water on the other side of the walls, so Sai quickly strips and heads inside to investigate on his own. However, Teruya suddenly gets an idea, so she follows him inside and climbs his back again without any plot covers to get him in the mood. As he then tries to get her off, Hattori, who fell into the hot springs earlier, decides to take the opportunity to relax, but she hears their voices and immediately puts her guard back up. Just then, Teruya tells Sai that the secret treasure is actually the Demon King's legacy and suggests taking it for himself before Hattori climbs up to a cliff and jumps off to attack him. Upon realizing that it's actually him, she jumps into the water to hide her cakes and tells him that Teruya is actually working for the government. With her cover blown, Teruya starts fighting her, but then Sai spots a wolf at the edge of the hot springs and prepares himself for a tough fight. Surprisingly, a single punch sends the malnourished beast flying, but it gets back up and charges in. Sai then decides to let it bite him, but it suddenly gets poisoned and flips over in the water. The next moment, Teruya gets upset with him for protecting Hattori and tosses him a key she found at the edge before running off. After Soga flies in with Eito, Sai heads back to reactivate Korone and wake Hiroshi, who got knocked out by Teruya. Eito then looks through everything they have gathered and explains what happened to Ei, causing them all to realize that he was connected to it all. The next moment, Eito turns the key to activate a portal that teleports them to the deepest part of the ruins, but as they try to check it out, Lily shows up and reveals that she was behind every challenge they encountered. She then claims the entire thing was a game they made up and tries to reward Sai with a kiss, but Eito quickly runs past her and uses a bomb to keep them back before using the last key to activate a closed-off system. Upon seeing this, Sai tries to go help her, but Lily stops him until Eito ends up summoning a great dragon named Peter. After explaining that he will send her to join her brother on the other side if she is not worthy of his power, he starts playing old memories from when Ani was still alive. During that last mission, he also learned of Peter's existence and was sent to destroy him to keep the Demon King from finding him. But after also learning that his employer wanted Peter's power for himself, he hid the voice recording and map as clues and erased his own memory of everything before getting strangled. As he then prepares to attack Eito, Sai once again tries to help, but Lily charges up her powers and nearly shatters his spine with a nasty body shot. The next moment, he gets pissed and almost disintegrates her entire body before charging towards Peter and taking his first attack head-on. This causes the Great Dragon to get intrigued, so he decides to test Sai instead, and after minutes of dueling, they both collapse from exhaustion. Peter then acknowledges Sai as his new master, but says he has to accept that he is the new Demon King. After Eito excitedly jumps on him to celebrate, Lily steals a kiss before they set up a throne to kickstart the new phase of his life. Several days later, Korone gets called to an abandoned project to have a meeting with the higher-ups overseeing her observation mission on Sai. After agreeing that women are the best tool to use against him, they tell her to get him hooked on her roboplots at all costs, or face possible termination. Weeks after this, Sai ends up at the seaside school enjoying the beach like every other student, but while they all play around in the sand, Soga suddenly asks if he wants to play with her buns instead. When he says they are much too small for his taste, she gets even more excited since she still has a lot of growing left to do, and this makes him feel relieved because she is just too stupid to make him uncomfortable. The next moment, Korone squeezes her milkers into his back and asks for help applying sunscreen, but he immediately moves away and says it would be impossible since she is wearing a thick swimsuit. To help with that, she starts taking it off, so he throws a towel to cover her up and wonders why she has been acting weird recently. After her meeting that evening, Tori had informed him that he would be the only one not allowed to go to the seaside school, so he spent most of the night upset in his bed until Korone suddenly climbed in and offered to let him experience her water fountain. Without even giving him a second to think, she reached for his lightsaber, but he quickly moved back to avoid her. She then told him not to worry about the seaside school because she had accepted full responsibility for him, and when he asked why, she explained that it was important for him to learn how to get it on with chicks. After he finally told her to shut it down, she climbed into the closet to give him space, but the very next morning, she woke him up by jumping on his morning brick and crushing it with her foot until he passed out. Minutes later, he tried to ask why she had been acting like a psychotic freak, and she responded by putting on a hot apron and acting heartbroken over his refusal to love her. In response to this, he explained that he only liked having meaningful relationships with the women he found attractive, and said they had to get to class since it was already time for the first lesson. On the way to class after this, he ignored the obvious staring from all the other students until Hiroshi complimented her maid outfit and asked about it. After claiming that there was nothing wrong with accepting her new role as his slave, she proceeded to spend the rest of the week trying everything possible to clap him, so he eventually snuck away to Peter's place for some privacy. However, he experienced another wave of shock upon seeing Soba casually sleeping on him, but he claims to also be surprised that a human could be so comfortable around him. Just as he tried to explain his plan to escape Korone, she showed up to ask if her jealous girlfriend act had changed anything about the way he felt towards her. As soon as he said no, she started asking if he liked Soga instead, and this naturally made him confused, so he asked if she suddenly started caring about his feelings in that manner. While Peter became fully invested in their conversation, Korone explained that she just wanted to know what he likes so she can always please him. Back in current time on the beach, Sai realizes that he has been holding her milkers this entire time, and Hattori naturally tries to attack him, so Korone makes him grab hers as well to balance the scales. However, this almost results in him getting split in half, and after cleaning himself up, he makes her apologize to Hattori. Despite this, Hattori remains upset that she would even do something like that, and this causes Korone to realize that she is still too inexperienced, so she offers to help her get freaky with Sai whenever she wants. While Hattori continues yelling at her, Sai notices that every other student now thinks that he claps them both whenever he wants, so he tries to explain himself to protect Hattori's honor, but they misunderstand like always. Minutes later, Sai finds Hattori hiding by a boat and apologizes for destroying her reputation again before asking if she wants to swim together. She then tries to scold him for suggesting such an idea at the worst possible time, but when he says he has never had the opportunity to really hang out with anyone, she realizes that he means well and invites Soga to join them. However, when Soga suddenly pulls out a sea cucumber and starts massaging it in front of them, she freaks out but still gets soaked in its slimy jizz. The next moment she grabs Sai, so he tries to clean it off, but asks her to move back a bit so he can see. She then regains her composure and jumps back while saying she doesn't need his help, but he ignores her and starts cleaning off the cream pie while she folds from his god-level aura. Afterwards, she thanks him for the help, and when he also thanks her for spending time with him, she asks why he doesn't call her first name like he does with Soga, as he explains how he always thought she was too uptight after everything that started happening in school. He admits that she is actually really nice to be around, but when he tries to call her first name, Korone yanks off her swimsuit to reveal her melons. She immediately swims away in embarrassment while he starts yelling at her for doing way too much and forgetting that she is actually just meant to observe him. After apologizing for overstepping, Korone explains that she just doesn't want him to forget that she actually likes him before leaving, but this further confuses him as well as Hattori, who then asks if she is okay. Minutes later, they start heading back, but Sai suddenly stops and says someone has been watching him before Soga spots Hiroshi. He then rushes over to ask the upgraded NPC where he is going, so Hiroshi explains that the island is actually his hometown, but his sad expression causes Sai to get worried, so he asks if everything is okay. Hiroshi then tells him that a certain legend about the Demon King is why they didn't want him to come to the island in the first place. According to the legend, a monster will reveal itself when the Demon King shows up, and a hero is supposedly meant to defeat both the monster and Demon King. But seeing as that never actually happened when the previous Demon King appeared, Sai tells Hiroshi to forget the stupid legend, but he refuses and says his immense strength stops him from understanding a regular person's weakness. After he runs off, Sai hears the suspicious voice from before and decides to do something about his stalker. Later that night, he tries to sneak out of the dorm, but Korone sees him and offers to help with her mana detection radar. Meanwhile, Eito stops by at Peter's place to tell him about her plan to become Sai's freaky empress and oppress their enemies with a cultured punishment ritual every night. Just as he admits that she would be a great empress to him, Lily shows up to talk and informs them of the special ministry of magical intelligence that has been plotting to destroy Sai to start a war. After also talking about their plan to use Coronet against him, she tells Eto not to even think of using him to fulfill her dark plans because she won't stand for anyone trying to plot against him. Before they even ask, she explains that although he is still a threat, she won't accept any illegal attempt to take him out before heading out. Eto then decides to contact Sai, but a signal problem stops her from reaching him, so she decides to try someone else. By then, Coronet's mana radar has also just glitched out due to a signal error, but she hears something running in the distance and rushes into the woods to find it. Moments later, Sai ends up outside a building, and Soga suddenly shows up to tell him everything Eto explained over the phone, but he notices that she is drunk and tries to calm her down first. That plan quickly falls apart as she starts tasting his ear and straddles his glizzy to get a kiss. The next moment, Coronet kicks them both and says they don't have time to discuss his lack of shame, but just as he turns toward the sound he has been hearing all day, they hear a gunshot and see Coronet dropping behind them. Shortly after Sai's magic assessment at the start of the school year, Hiroshi learned that he was actually a hero, but he and Tori agreed to keep it a secret due to how surprising it was. After Soga also passes out from the excessive drinking, he rushes to help Coronet, but she tells him not to worry and pulls herself back up before asking if he has feelings for Soga. This catches him off guard, so he asks how she can be thinking about his relationships in this situation. She then says something about failing to accomplish her mission before saying that this might be the last time they see each other. As he tries to figure out what on earth is going on, she opens up a portal and thanks him for all the time they spent together before leaving. The next moment, Soga wakes up and apologizes for being too intoxicated to remember everything Eto told her over the phone. While she explains it in more detail, Hiroshi joins his sister Yukiko outside their house to talk. When she asks him about the Demon King that recently joined his academy, he tries to explain how kind Sai actually is, but they overhear two guests talking about how he is way too weak to protect their village. As they continue discussing how useless he is, he gets fed up and decides to return to the dorm. However, Yukiko shows up the next day to see Sai, so Hiroshi tries to distract them from her questions, but she continues asking if he is actually the Demon King. He explains that he is not the monster everyone makes him out to be. After saying that him not being the Demon King means Hiroshi is also not a real hero, she runs off, so Hiroshi and Soga chase after her. Hattori then calls Sai stupid for being too slow to realize that his refusal to accept reality is making it hard for Hiroshi to own up to who he really is. Minutes later, Hiroshi ends up in front of a lake with Soga, and after she explains how shocking it was to hear that he is a hero, he decides to give her more details of the island's legend. Turns out the lake in front of them is the one where the mythical beast is said to be sleeping, but instead of an actual beast, Hiroshi explains that a cave connecting the lake to the ocean is the real cause of the constant cries they hear from the water. After he also explains how his family created a shrine in the cave and kept a dollar store version of Excalibur that can only be pulled out by the hero, they hear a scream from the other side of the lake and think it's Yukiko. However, upon getting there, they see an old geezer dressed like an office clown screaming chants toward the lake. At first, they both suspect that he might be insane until he opens up his jacket and summons a Titan Class sea cucumber. The next moment, Yukiko drops to the ground in fear, and that causes Mrex to notice. So he grabs her and decides to send her up to the Lord because his sacred ritual is meant to be a secret. As he starts having his fun with her, Soga tries to sneak up on him, but he captures her as well, so Hiroshi decides to put on his big boy pants. However, after getting smacked around like a sandbag, he starts losing confidence, so Mrex decides to stop playing around and kicks him out into the water. By nightfall, Sai and Hattori arrive on the scene, and the mere presence of his mana causes Mrex to get excited, so he drops the girls and asks for a real fight. Upon seeing Soga and Yukiko's scared faces, Sai loses it and completely transforms his body into a chiseled death machine before forcing Mr. X back with several brutal combinations. He then tries to finish off the suit-lugging psycho, but Soga tells him not to go that far, so he tries the civilized approach by asking Mr. what he wants. X then reveals his plan to let the monster cucumber destroy every village on the island, and suddenly releases painful sound waves from his jacket to paralyze Sai. Although he manages to fight past it, he notices his mana quickly dropping, so X explains his anti-magic abilities before proceeding to repay all of Sai's punches by brutally attacking him, while Sai keeps taking a beating. Hiroshi decides to stop being a completely worthless hero right in the middle of drowning. He then makes his way into the secret cave and pulls out the sword his folks kept in a stone. The next moment, it transforms into a downgraded version of the Omnitrix and activates a super suit to make up for his complete lack of skill. Back on the surface, Sai finally figures out a way to counter X's anti-magic abilities, but even after going all out, the old geezer gets back up and decides to kickstart his villain arc by blowing the girls up. Thankfully, Koro-ne returns right on time to protect them, and explains that she agreed to a deal that spared her life before telling X that he has been deemed unfit to continue working for the Ministry of Magical Intelligence. She then takes in a matter of seconds, but by then, the sea cucumber has already started destroying Hiroshi's hometown. As they immediately start running toward it, Hiroshi flies in and completely obliterates the slimy beast with one attack. He then tries to murk X as well, but Sai stops him and says it doesn't have to reach that point. The next moment, he flies off, only to return in his regular form and act like he was saved by the hero. The next day, Koro-ne explains how she negotiated her way to freedom again and tells Sai that she has actually been trying to teach him Riz, because he is clueless when it comes to chicks. She further reveals that the government actually wants him to get married to a decent hottie to reduce the chance of having an overpowered psycho on the loose. As he then starts to connect the dots, she suddenly asks Satori to marry him, but this causes the inexperienced virgin to flip out, so Koro-ne continues the Riz lessons by practicing a freaky pickup line on him. Days later, Teruya meets up with a man named Yamato to ask why the plan for Sai's death failed. After saying that what happened in the ruins didn't follow his exact plans, he tells her to focus on Hattori next, so she runs off to cook up another diabolical scheme. In a dream the following day, Sai thinks back to the day Soga first showed up at his orphanage. After spending all his savings on the hairpin he gave her, he told her to keep it safe because it could be the only way for them to recognize each other in the coming years. Just then, Soda finds him sleeping under a tree and decides to join him for a quick chat. She first asks for his birthday, but he explains that he never actually had one because none of the nuns at the monastery could figure out who dropped him at their doorstep. After saying that she also had a similar experience, she suggests choosing a random day for himself since she also did the same. As she then continues yapping, he catches a glimpse of her hairpin and asks if they really never met before. He goes on to ask where she got the hairpin from, but she claims to have no recollection of it and says he is probably just looking for a reason to make their relationship special. After asking him to celebrate her birthday whenever the day comes, she suddenly decides to fall asleep right beside him. Around the same time, Heto makes it into the deepest cave in the ruins to find magical monsters for her plan to dominate the world as Sai's empress. As she then drifts into a freaky dream where Sai manhandles her milkers, one of the monsters brings her back to reality by latching its tentacles to all her plot cannons and trying to reach every hole it can find. After struggling to fight the slimy pleasure of climaxing, she drops a bomb to stop it and climbs its shell to establish dominance. But the freaky monster continues obsessing over her plot, so she drops another bomb to finish it off. Just as she spots a floating egg in a lake of monster guts, Peter shows up to ask why she is in the ruins, so she quickly hides the egg and claims she was just keeping an eye on the monster situation for Sai. While Peter starts thinking about the fact that magical monsters became more active after Sai's awakening, Hiroshi joins him to watch a news segment about Brave, the hero everyone fell in love with overnight. When Sai asks if it's really okay for some low-budget blue beetle to run around dishing out his version of justice, Hiroshi jumps in to defend his secret identity and says it doesn't matter as long as the people are kept safe from monsters. After they hear Soga asking Koro-ne for another serving of rice and wonder how she can eat so much food every single day, Hiroshi gets excited to watch a popular idol named Yuki. As Yuki markets a new rice seasoning, Soga tells them about the seasoning she prefers in her rice, but Sai finally asks why she pays more attention to food than her studies. Upon hearing this, she decides to stop eating for the day and leaves to take a nap. But Sai continues worrying and wonders how they can get her back in class. Hiroshi then reveals that she is actually pretty good with her studies and only struggles to make friends because of her low level of magic. This confuses Sai since magic level is usually predetermined at birth. So Koro-ne further explains people with high levels of magic are considered to be close to God, while those with low magic affinity get treated like NPCs. After Sai gets upset at the unfair treatment being given to her and says he will change the world for good, Hiroshi heads out but stops by a water fountain to ponder on his next course of action. Later on, Sai finds Soga munching on rice again, so he tells her to follow him to class. As he then turns to lead her inside, she ditches her clothes and activates her invisibility. But he still sees her plot covers and chases after her, while all the other students wonder if his depravity will ever end. In the room that night, he discusses it with Korone in the hopes that she might give him a new idea on how to deal with Soga. But Korone reminds him that being friends with the most hated guy on campus is probably the main reason she avoids everyone else. During lunch the very next day, Soga shows up to talk to him about her birthday again. But this time, he tells her to stop talking to him so she can finally have regular relationships with all the other students. The next moment, her entire mood changes, so he offers to continue their relationship if she starts coming to class. But she suddenly gets excited again and promises to weather the storm of being the social outcast with him. To prove her loyalty, she then pounces on him and refuses to let go until Hattori shows up. Right then, Sai remembers how to use his hands and pushes her away, but she still fails to get the message and promises to come see him again before flying off. Moments later, Sai takes Hattori outside to talk about the situation with Soga, but instead of helping, she asks if he has feelings for her and says she can't do anything about it before walking off. She then spends the rest of the night cursing herself for acting stupid just because of the marriage request Korone brought up the other day. Following afternoon, Eto returns to her room to trigger the monster egg's growth with a special powder, but after yet another failed attempt, she decides to take a quick nap, but the egg suddenly develops invisible legs and escapes. Minutes later, Soga shows up in Sai's room with the egg to make a special rice recipe, and for some reason, both Sai and Korone fail to realize that there is nothing normal about the egg. By then, Eto has just woken up and realized that the egg is missing, so A tells her what happened, and she immediately figures out who stole it. Back in Sai's room, Hiroshi, who has just shown up, easily puts 2 and 2 together and tells Sai that the egg is obviously a monster egg, so he grabs it for a closer look. Just then, it starts to glow, so he tosses it out of the window, but upon getting outside moments later, they see that it has grown to the size of their dorm building. Sai then decides that the wisest course of action is to touch the egg, but his insane mana level causes it to crack, and the 2-headed monster chicken sleeping inside finally wakes up with nothing but bloodlust and destruction on its mind. While Hiroshi starts preparing his low-budget Omnitrix, Sai quickly pushes Soga out of the way to protect her. After he gets bitten in the arm, Korone prepares her blaster to deep fry the mutated chicken. But then Eto shows up to prove her worth to Sai by commanding the beast. Unfortunately, her plan falls apart in an instant as it tries to use her as dinner, so Sai fires off a plasma orb to stop it. But his mana once again causes it to grow, so it takes off and starts heading for the big city. Upon seeing this, Hiroshi activates his Power Rongear's super suit and takes off to stop it because his idol, Yuri, happens to be filming another commercial in the city. By the time her camera crew spots the beast, it is already too late, so they try to find shelter and almost get crushed by falling debris. Thankfully, Hiroshi catches up to the beast in time and chops off the first head before using a molecular whip to reduce the rest of its body to nugget-sized bits. He then tracks Yuri's vitals and heads down to save her from the rubble, and she immediately rewards him with a kiss and starts gushing about how cool he is. In the council office the following day, Lily decides to forget about the monster chicken incident since the damage caused was minimal. But after Sai leaves the office, she agrees with the others that he is way more dangerous than they thought. While they continue discussing it, he runs into Soga, who then apologizes for skipping class and promises to start showing up before reminding him that he has to celebrate her birthday with her, and running off. Around the same time, Hattori meets up with Korone to ask if she was serious about the whole marriage thing, so Korone explains that she has already contacted her parents to set up a meeting for the two of them. On a certain night a few years ago, Sai and his friends from the monastery were visited by a rich nobleman who decided to shower them with gifts and money since he had way too much in his offshore accounts. As they all started thanking him, he rejected their glazing and said they should thank God instead. But Sai refused and said he didn't believe in God. This shocked the rich man, so he tried to explain how wrong it was to have such a mindset. But Sai insisted that he would not acknowledge a fictional being created by the elites to control the rest of humanity. Upon hearing this, the kind man got pissed, so all the nuns started apologizing on Sai's behalf and told him to offer his respects, even if he didn't believe in the man's way of life. This, however, triggered Sai's commitment to changing the world because he hated being forced to accept something he didn't believe in. Back in the academy, Hattori has just gotten on the phone with her dad to explain how marriage might be a bad idea since Sai is not the type of person to easily change his beliefs. After telling her that they will still go ahead with the meeting, he hangs up the phone. So Hattori starts acting out imaginary conversations with Sai to figure out the best way to invite him to her family home. A couple minutes into it, some students start to fear that she has actually lost it, but she remains lost in thought until Korone shows up and suggests having an actual conversation instead of acting like a psych ward patient. Hattori then says it won't even be possible because she has no idea where he is, but Korone tells her not to worry and pulls out a Sai sensor before taking her to one of the smaller cafeterias. Once there, Hattori struggles to hide how shy she feels while asking Sai to come visit her family home since vacation starts tomorrow. But then Hiroshi stops her to ask who she is talking to because she has been staring in his direction this entire time. As Sai also looks back to figure out what she wants, his face card deep fries her last remaining brain cells, so she tells Hiroshi to tag along and make it a friend group thing instead of asking Sai like she originally planned. Korone also reminds them that she has to come as well, and after agreeing to it, Sai goes out for a walk and sees Yamato having a conversation with the headmaster. On getting closer, he overhears Yamato warning him of the recent increase in magical monsters and specifically the fact that the monsters are responding to the presence of a certain someone. Upon hearing this, Sai stops and asks if he is blaming him for all the recent attacks, and Yamato claps back by asking if it's finally clocking to him that everything is his fault. On a train later on, he continues thinking about it until he sees Soga waving him goodbye. After Hiroshi tells him that she will be lonely in the academy, he says it won't be a problem since they won't be gone for too long. Minutes later, he notices Hattori's face turning red, so he asks if she is okay and starts trying to find the words to explain the situation. Korone notices this and offers to help her explain, but she holds her mouth shut and tells Sai that the meeting with her dad is just some random political chat. Sai then gives it some thought and says he is ready to be responsible, but Hattori mistakes his self-reflection as him being ready for marriage and almost passes out from embarrassment. Shortly after this, they get to her hometown, so she explains the path they have to take before suddenly pulling out her sword to block a ninja star aimed at Sai. The next moment, her little sister Yuri jumps out, and Hiroshi almost passes out in shock as he immediately remembers the kiss she gave him the other night. Yuri then notices how shy Hattori is acting around Sai and tries to ask why she wants to marry someone so dangerous, but Hattori threatens to chop her head off, so she agrees to stop talking. However, while walking with Hiroshi moments later, she explains that Sai gave her bad vibes as soon as they got off the bus because after surviving a magic beast's attack years ago, her body became sensitive to creatures with unusual levels of magic. Shortly after this, Sai meets up with Hattori's dad, who then asks if he is actually ready to protect her honor despite all the drama surrounding his reawakening as the Demon King. Like always, Sai misunderstands this as just a simple father looking out for his daughter, so he promises to protect Hattori at all times, and her dad responds by calling for a feast to celebrate. As they all spend most of the night having a blast, Sai starts to wonder if it's normal to go all out for something so simple. Shortly after all the fun and games, Hattori hops into the bath to get cleaned up, but the fear that he is still confused about everything creeps in, so she decides to figure out what he actually wants at all costs. Minutes later, Sai tries to fall asleep, but then he sees a shadow outside his room and gets up to ask who it is. Just then, Hattori enters the room to speak with him, but the eager look in her eye catches him off guard, so he tries to avoid a conversation and asks if they can just talk in the morning. She then reaches for the top of her robe to pull it off, but he stops her and says she doesn't have to force herself just to please her family. Upon hearing this, Hattori realizes that he has no idea what is actually going on, so she explains that they all expect him to marry her. He immediately pulls back in shock and starts apologizing for not realizing sooner because she obviously doesn't want that, but Hattori, who has secretly been hiding her true feelings, gets heartbroken as she now thinks he has never felt the slightest bit of love for her. She then tells him to forget about everything that happened and leaves, but as he tries to wrap his head around everything, every ninja in her clan breaks into his room to skin him alive for breaking her heart. Without giving it a second thought, Sai runs out of the house, so they all start chasing him into the woods until a trap net captures them all in one swoop. The next moment, Teruya reveals herself and tells Sai to come join her family instead, but he rejects the offer and says he just can't bring himself to like her. She then decides to unalive him, but first tells him that he shouldn't have left Soga all alone in the academy. Around the same time, Soga prepares to wish herself a happy birthday without realizing that she is being watched by a creepy assassin named Ai. Once he figures out her location, their leader Keizo sends another assassin named Snake to finish her off. Back in the woods, Teruya explains to Sai that her family occasionally conducts assassinations for the Ministry of Magic Intelligence whenever they find a target that poses a serious threat. As soon as she says that Soga's fate has already been sealed, Sai loses control of his abilities and almost incinerates her with the mana flowing out of his body. But then Yuri suddenly shows up, so he stops himself. Teruya then makes a run for it, But instead of chasing her, Sai stays back to apologize to Yuri for making Hattori cry. As she continues cussing him out, Korone shows up and says her programming stops her from allowing him to return to the academy. But after holding up her blaster to make it look like she actually tried to stop him, she walks over and pulls his hand toward her tail. He then thanks her and yanks the cord before opening up a portal to the academy. By then, Snake has already started strangling Soga, but he suddenly gets chopped to bits by a samurai's blade. After revealing himself, Yamato also cuts down the other assassins before Sai finally makes it through the other end of the portal. Sai initially considers thanking him for saving her, but when he starts explaining how useful she will be for his plan to liberate the gods, Sai changes his mind and powers up for a fight. Yamato then slices off one of his arms, but Sai quickly regenerates it, so Soga hugs him to stop Yamato from cutting off anything else. The next moment, Eito crashes in with all the magic beasts she managed to tame, so Sai and Soga hop on the Hydra Wolf. After thanking her for the help, Sai decides that it's finally time to reclaim power from the so-called gods. But Yamato reveals that he already expected Sai to destroy the world. After the entire academy gets covered by magic beasts, Yamato summons a sword, which surprises Eito since the magic beasts should make it impossible to transport any weapon using mana. But Sai tells her that he is definitely not using regular mana. As they both start fighting, Hiroshi tries to wrap his head around the insanity unfolding in front of him. Teruya also tries to make some sense from all the chaos, but her dad, Keizo, suddenly jumps in through a portal to tell her about Yamato's betrayal. The next moment, she stabs him in the heart and waits until he falls into a pool of his own blood before taking his badge, which signifies total authority over their family's ninja clan. Right then, she senses someone and prepares to fight, but a four-eyed creep named Tuve reveals himself and explains that he is actually Yamato's subordinate from the Ministry of Magical Intelligence. Minutes later, Hattori joins her dad to watch the news of what is happening at the academy, and after telling her that Sai is the one behind Keizo's death, he pulls out a sacred sword passed down from the older generations in their family. When Hattori reminds him that no one has been able to pull the sword out, her grandmother shows up and hands it over to her. This further confuses Hattori, so she asks if there is a particular reason why they think she might be worthy of it, and her grandmother explains that the sword will decide if she is worthy of wielding it or not. Back at the academy, Teruya has just assembled her clan to stop Sai's army of magical beasts, but as she gets dressed for the showdown, Tuve enters to get a quick peek at her goods but claims he just wants to discuss something important with her. Meanwhile, Yamato has just landed a brutal slice on Sai's arm, and as he drops to the floor, Eito realizes that he no longer has enough mana to regenerate, so she orders the Hydra to grab him before taking off to escape Yamato. After telling Soga that they need to buy Sai some time and get him to Peter, they suddenly stop at the entrance to the ruins because the headmaster has also decided to join the fight. Eito then asks if he can actually handle Yamato, so he assures them that it's no big deal. They head inside, only to get stopped by Lily. As usual, she starts ranting about how the academy should have never involved itself with the Demon King. So Sai pulls himself up to tell her that they will leave as soon as he meets Peter, but she tells him that it's pointless before pulling up live feed of the situation outside. Upon seeing this, Sai and the girls prepare for the long-awaited fight with her, but she decides to let them pass. Moments later, Hattori teleports into the academy with her family and clan as well, but Yuki quickly steals the spotlight as her camera crew immediately starts a broadcast. While she responds to all the questions with a cheery attitude, Hattori thinks back to the mana reaction she suddenly developed after the encounter with Sai and wonders if it's connected to her sudden spike of energy. Minutes later, they all assemble before Teruya and agree to fight under her command since the common goal is now to stop Sai. However, Teruya becomes more obsessed with taking the sword Hattori's dad passed down to her, so she decides to send both sisters out as the first offensive wave, and Yuri immediately gets excited to be the first one to slay beasts. Hattori, on the other hand, becomes suspicious and realizes that Teruya just wants them out of the way, but she still agrees to it since they don't really have a choice. As they start running towards the ruins, Hiroshi suddenly shows up to meet Yuri, so she hugs him and asks for his support to defeat Sai. While Hiroshi starts wondering if he actually has the heart to go against his best friend, Peter struggles to contain his excitement because he has been waiting for ages to test out his strength. Sai notices this and excitedly reveals his plan to destroy the current god, but while Eito loses her senses to his manliness, Soba gets worried for him, so he assures her that nothing will go wrong. While he climbs Peter's wings to launch their attack, the headmaster decides to stop chatting with Yamato and suddenly transforms into a medieval version of the Hulk to fight him. Right then, Peter blasts his way out of the ruins and becomes the center of attention as Sai also charges up his mana to announce his presence. Upon seeing this, Teruya orders the sisters to stop him, but Hattori suddenly gets cold feet as she never imagined that they would end up on opposite sides of a war. However, after taking one look at her people, she grabs her regular sword and takes off to attack him. But he easily stops her blade, so she jumps back and starts fighting the effects of his perfect jawline. After an intense mental battle to control her emotions, she asks why he always acts like he doesn't really care about her, so he picks her up and apologizes for neglecting her emotions before casually throwing her off. The next moment, Hiroshi charges in and lands a deep cut across Peter's midsection, but instead of getting pissed, he actually gets excited and says no one has ever managed to draw blood from him. Sai then tells him to consider the possibility that they might lose the fight, but this only gets him a lot more excited since he can finally go all out against a worthy opponent. While they both prepare for the fight, Tuve tells Teruya to focus on finding the device Eto is using to control the magic beasts so they can use it instead. She then orders Hattori and Yuri to go find it, and Yuri excitedly runs toward the ruins while Hattori continues telling her to calm down. The next moment, Hattori sees a mysterious man about to attack Yuri, so she jumps in to save her before ninjas show up to fight for them. While they both start fighting off the Elastic Man, Hiroshi asks Sai why he couldn't use his power to change the people's minds if he is so fixated on good change. Sai reminds him that these are the same people that started worshipping a false god and used it as an excuse to discriminate against each other. After saying that he will stop at nothing to change the world, he charges up his mana and gives Peter enough energy to bite down on Hiroshi. The next moment, he also starts channeling his mana into a deadly blast, but Hiroshi suddenly activates a skill that neutralizes the attack and drains Peter's magic. To make matters worse, a mega-sized gunship suddenly enters the airspace and starts firing on them, but instead of running, Peter tells Sai that they can recharge their mana level by flying close to it. By then, the headmaster has just reminded Yamato that they defeated the previous Demon King together, and suddenly realizes that the only reason he went after Soga was to receive the kind of power Sai currently has. Back in the air, Peter's gamble pays off, so they start firing back at the ship, but then Tuve decides to take control of it by hypnotizing the pilot and crashing it straight into Sai and Peter. Years ago, Yamato had to watch a version of Soga that he loved get taken away by the Demon King of that era, simply because only his power could match her abilities. Desperate to get her back, he mastered the art of time travel but only kept running into different realities where the exact same thing kept happening. Now, Hattori and the others have just lost all hope as they believe that Sai got crushed under the battleship. But when all the magic beasts start flying towards the ship, Soka tells Eto not to give up hope because they are still reacting to his mana. Hattori also notices that Yuri is still reacting to his mana, so she decides to keep fighting with the hope that he can pull himself out of the ship's rubble. Hiroshi, on the other hand, runs toward the ship to find him, but then he sees the headmaster, who then stops him and says it's his duty to protect every student from the war. Despite this, Hiroshi still tries to fight Yamato, but his suit suddenly gets turned off before Yamato reveals that he is the one who actually made it. As he then tries to finish off the headmaster, Hiroshi tells him to stop and threatens to go against him because he clearly made the suit to stop Sai. He further agrees to cooperate with him in exchange for more power to save Yuri, so Yamato decides to spare the headmaster. Meanwhile, Soga tries to explain how she can sense Sai's aura, which proves that he is still alive, but then Eto suddenly notices something and uses one of her explosive potions to reveal La Paz, the elastic creep from before. Upon seeing his ugly face, she pulls out a whip to beat some sense into him, but this ends up pleasing the depraved maniac and almost gives Eto a heart attack. Back outside, Teruya's ninja army prepares to invade the ruins and defeat Sai once and for all, but they all get their insides adjusted by Lili's flash punches. After she reveals that Teruya is the one who clapped their leader Keizu, the entire army comes to a standstill as they never expected to hear such an accusation. But Teruya immediately orders them to resume the attack. Once again, Lili blasts through their front lines, but when she finally gets close to Teruya, she spins another story about how Lili is actually working with Sai to destroy the world. Her ninja army then decides to use all their firepower on Lili, but the other girls from the council show up just in time to support her. While they then combine their abilities to fight Teruya's army, the vice president, Michi, uses her bat summoning powers to stop La Paz from attacking Eto and Soga, but he quickly gets used to it and intensifies his attacks. That isn't enough. Yamato shows up to take Soga, and just as he tells her not to even bother resisting, she switches personalities and tries to talk him out of doing something stupid. However, he insists that his plan is for the sake of humanity and turns her brain off, but as he tries to leave, Eito uses her whip to stop him. She then accuses him of putting innocent lives in danger, but then he reminds her that she is part of the reason Sai has become such a formidable force. After grabbing her whip and saying she is too weak to stop him, he teleports away with Soga, so Eito takes off on the Hydra to save Miche from La Paz. Meanwhile, Lily and the other chicks on the council have almost completely cleared out Toria's ninja army, so she contacts Hattori and orders her to stop them. Naturally, Hattori hesitates and says Lily is one of the good guys, but then Teruya threatens to send Yuri up to the Lord if she refuses to obey. Moments later, Lily and her sidekicks see Hattori waiting for them, and noticing Teruya holding a knife behind Yuri's back, they realize what the situation is. However, Lily still insists that she has to stop Teruya at all costs, so Hattori gives her ninjas the order to initiate the first attack. Right then, they all get smoked by a group of puppets, who then reaffirm that Teruya unalived her father. Despite hearing this, Hattori still powers up to fight Lily, so she attacks with a brutal punch that knocks her down before telling the others to grab Yuri. Right then, Teruya tries to cut Yuri in half, but Hiroshi shows up at the last moment to protect her and takes off to join Yamato, who then transports them both to a safe location. Using that opportunity, Lily resumes her attack on Teruya, but she escapes with a substitution jutsu. Tu then offers Lily an alliance, but she rejects the offer, so he summons another army of puppets to attack her. Thankfully, Eito destroys them all with one of her bombs, and Lily immediately drops the creepy puppet master with her most powerful punch before they realize that he is also just a puppet. The next moment, the battleship starts moving and suddenly gets covered in electricity as Sai finally regains enough strength to lift it. Minutes later, he thanks the headmaster for boosting his mana up and tells the girls that he has to get Soga back before climbing Peter. As he prepares to take off, Teruya orders Hattori to stop him, and her ninjas immediately tell her to obey since Teruya is the head of their clans. But after thinking hard on what her grandmother said while handing her the family sword, she decides to follow her heart instead. This finally gives her enough magic to pull the sword out, so she decides to test it out on Teruya, but Korone blocks it and says she needs to be alive to pay for her crimes. Teruya then tries to escape again, but her dad resurfaces and promises to atone for his sins by correcting her. While she completely loses her mind from shock, Sai prepares to fight Hiroshi. When Hiroshi asks why he has to challenge God and change the world as they know it, he replies that it's the only way for humanity to progress. But Hiroshi refuses to accept his plans because gaining more power as the Demon King could spell disaster for Yuri. As he then prepares an anti-magic weapon to stop him, Peter warns Sai that his mana will be useless against the weapon, but Sai reveals that he never planned to use magic against him. The next moment, Peter charges in and launches him straight into Hiroshi, who gets shocked when Sai grabs his weapon despite the brutal effects on his body. As his arm starts melting away, Hiroshi tells him to stop, but Sai presses even harder, so Hiroshi decides to release all his magic with a huge blast that deep fries his suit's motherboard. This causes them both to start falling, but after regenerating his arm, Sai apologizes for going that far and assures him that he is only fighting for change to make a better world. Once they get back to the ground, Yuri rushes to Hiroshi and initially gets shocked when she sees that he is brave, but then she hugs him and says she never cared who was behind the mask. The next moment, her body reacts to Sai's mana, so he turns to leave. And when Hiroshi asks why he can't just purge the mana affecting her, Sai explains that one wrong move might leave her scarred for life. Around the same time, Yamato makes it inside the facility housing the creature called Identity. But as he gets closer with Soga still unconscious, two chicks show up to stop him, but he easily cuts them down with a single slice of his blade. After explaining how his mission to clap is basically to save all of humanity, he activates the system and walks into Identity. But then it possesses Soga to remind him that he has tried to fight destiny through countless lifetimes. When Yamato asks why he has always failed, Identity explains that it has never been his duty in the first place, and this causes him to get emotional as he recalls spending centuries trying to win a battle he was destined to lose. As he continues sobbing, Identity tries to comfort him, but then he grabs Soga and says he has nothing else to lose. She then regains consciousness and tries to fight him off until Sai finally shows up to stop him. After saying that they would have been friends in a different life, Yamato drops her and cuts his legs to keep him in place. Upon seeing this, Soga tries to help, but Sai tells her to stop right before Yamato slices him right down the middle. The next moment, Sai appears behind him and blasts him away before explaining that he was actually fighting a clone. He then fires off a gravity-amplifying skill that knocks Yamato out, but the android chicks immediately tell him to reunite with the Identity, and accomplish his destiny by destroying humanity. After he refuses and says he only wanted to keep Soga safe, they initiate the self-destruct sequence to end all of humanity by releasing the identity's powers. So Sai summons Peter and takes off to destroy the entity. Upon seeing this, Yamato warns that he might not make it back alive, but he continues heading towards the identity, so Soga also drops her clothes to activate her abilities. Moments later, Peter blasts a hole into the identity, but after flying into the deepest part and connecting to its mainframe, he asks Sai for cover from the endless swarm of android samurais because he has to drain out all the identity's functions. Sai then unleashes all of his magic at once to blow them all to bits, but this causes him to lose control and create a black hole since he has never used this much magic before. After failing to connect to him, Peter tells Soga to protect him and leaves a piece of his tooth so she can always remember him. She then flies to Sai and hugs him with a promise to always support him before entering a trance where she meets the version of herself that first connected with the identity. She then tells Soga that Sai's life would be so much better without the pressure of being the Demon King weighing on him, so they both decide to fix it and combine their powers before Peter releases every ounce of magic he has left to destroy the identity. Shortly after the explosion, Hattori flies over the site with a chopper until she spots Soga and Sai. She then rushes over with the others to check on them, but Yuri suddenly grabs Sai and asks him to take good care of Hattori since they are going to get married. This surprises them since she is clearly not reacting to his mana, so Hiroshi asks if she no longer cares about him being the Demon King. After she says the Demon King died in the explosion, Sai realizes that his memory has been altered, so he tries to ask Soga about it, but she takes off to avoid the question. Days later, life slowly returns to normal in the academy, but while everyone else settles into the new peaceful era, Eto gets pissed because Sai is no longer going to manhandle her buns as the Demon King. Will Sai actually get married to Hattori or start a harem to fulfill Eto's dreams? Comment Freaky Demon King to find out, and don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing to make sure you never miss any of our recaps.